Can Scott Frost and McKenzie Milton develop QBs at a rate where they can close the gap between them and their Big 12 foes?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. On today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about what Scott Frost and McKenzie Milton have to do with developing QBs to close the gap between UCF and the rest of the conference starting in year one. We're going to talk about Kane Archer, the recent commit, and why I think he might be an important piece to the future of UCF. And we're going to talk about how they develop a capable backup just in case the first guy doesn't work out. Let's start at the top. QB development is going to be the piece that Scott Frost has to pull together. Scott Frost will be judged by his ability to be able to develop and produce high-level QBs. It's why I like the decision to bring McKenzie Milton in as your QB coach. He is a living, breathing example of what you can do with QBs, and he's not that removed from the game. As a matter of fact, he's so not that removed from the game that he's going to be getting a little bit of a cut of the pie from that settlement. It's going back to 2016. Guys, he was obviously at the head of that undefeated team in 2017, and he's still getting cut a check. He remembers what this is like. He remembers what it was like to have your name used for NIL and not be able to make money on your own name. He's going to be able to relate to kids. That's going to help them get them in the door. Once they get them in the door, what are they going to be able to do with them? Well, until you can close that talent gap in recruiting, development is going to be the key for this staff. They've got to out-develop, and they've got to outcoach, and they've got to consistently outperform their composite talent levels, until they can catch up. That's it. That's where Scott Frost stands in 2025. If he can do that, I think that UCF is going to find themselves in a very advantageous position. They did the hard part. They got into a conference where their winning will matter if they can win. And that was the drawback to that 2017 team. Great team. They didn't get a chance to prove it against the best in college football. We saw Arizona State get that chance this year. UCF could find themselves in that position if they have the right coach at the helm, which we all think Scott Frost is. Now, NIL has changed the game. So you've got teams out here trying to buy championships. That's what they're doing in the SEC. That's what they're doing in the Big Ten. Development still matters because once the money is even, you're still recruiting on all those traditional things. You're still pitching development. You're still pitching an opportunity to get to the pros. You're still pitching fit. You're still pitching system. You're still talking to kids about why UCF is just flat out better than the other school that they're planning to attend. You're in a warm weather climate. I know that may sound silly, but look, I'd rather spend, time in Florida, Orlando weather over cold Oregon weather any day. That's just me. You got a place where there's stuff to do. It's not a boring college town, that's for sure. UCF should be a premier destination for athletes now that Scott Frost is in town. And as a matter of fact, it's always been a premier destination for athletes. 2017 could be it should have been the start of something. And it was a crime that team didn't get a chance to prove what they could do. Because you know what? You don't have to be the most talented team on the field. You just need to be better than the guys that you played that day. And every single week in 2017, when they took the field, they were better than every single team that they took the field with. That 2017 Auburn team was one game away from making the college football playoff. They beat Georgia and Alabama in back-to-back SEC games, and UCF wiped the floor with them. I don't think anybody would argue that, on average, Auburn has maybe brought in more talent than UCF, but they were much, much better than Auburn that day. I think that Scott Frost has the ability to recreate those same conditions in 2025. Now, he's going to need some money to play with, but you got to understand, until you start to win, until you start to prove it on the field, until you can show the boosters and the people with the money that you can do almost more than what you have, the money may be hard to flow. But I think that once the results start to roll in and the people with the money will start to see, look, UCF football is a good investment under Scott Frost, and we should put more money behind them. But it's going to be about developing the kids that you have, showing that you can, get the most out of the guys that you have. Show that you have a competitive football team. You don't have to win every game. That's why when Andrew Gluchov and I did our top 5 most important games, I put North Carolina on the list. You're going up against a Super Bowl champion winning coach in Bill Belichick. And it may be his first time, as a head coach at the college level. But you've got a chance to show UCF fans and recruits that your program is headed the right direction. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that game. There's going to be a lot of attention on that game. It's exactly the type of headline-grabbing game that Scott Frost needs in his first year. And it may not amount to a hill of beans in terms of the conference standings, but I'm not sure the goal is to win the Big 12 in this first year. For all intents and purposes, people, this is a rebuild. And a rebuild starts with recruiting. You need time to recruit. We're not going to know how well they're doing until year 3 or 4, most likely. But once they get there, what are they going to look like? Well, the foundation of that is going to be built on the recruits that they're bringing in right now. One of those guys is Kane Archer. We're going to talk about him and the role he's going to play right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. That's what I like to do. I'm not much of a beach person myself. New to FanDuel, new customers can get just $5 and get just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bets wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. FanDuel. What UCF is going to be able to accomplish is going to be built on the start of what this recruiting class is. One of the key pieces to this class is going to be Kane Archer. This is a guy who we sat down and talked with. We did an interview. If you haven't seen that interview, I encourage you to click back on the channel and see that conversation with Kane. He was such a great kid, very gracious in sitting down to talk with us to give UCF fans a chance to see the type of man that Scott Frost is recruiting to the program today. I want to talk a little bit about Kane Archer and the stats that he's amassed and why I think that he's going to be a big part of that development piece for Scott Frost here in his first year. When you look at Kane Archer and what he was able to do just on the high school level, that's pretty fantastic. I mean, Kane Archer looked unshakable last year in his junior season. His stats were obviously very good, but he's more than just his stats. You got to look at the whole person. Kane Archer has everything I think that Scott Frost is going to need. Now, look, he may not be the highest rated name out there in recruiting right now, but I think that when you're building a foundation, you find those diamonds in the rough, you find those kids that everybody else overlooked. I think this year you'll start to see him climb the recruiting rankings a little bit. He's still got to play his senior season. Let's dig into Kane Archer a little bit. The progression that you saw from him as a player. His sophomore season, 62% completion percentage, ridiculous in his junior season, at 81%. 81% completion percentage in his junior season, 8,000. I'm sorry, 8,000 would be ridiculous. 3,880 yards passing, 57 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions, had 795 yards on the ground, 10 rushing TDs. Look, and in 3 playoff games, he amassed 1,000 yards passing, 13 TDs through the air, 5 TDs on the ground, 212 rushing yards. Kane Archer is an absolute monster. Now, you may look at the competition that he was going up against and say, okay, well, look at who they were playing, man amongst boys, but he's got all the tools. And I sat down and I talked with a couple of talent guys at the college level. We watched his tape and they said, Mike, this kid is accurate. He's got great mechanics. Seems to have a lot of poise. He moves well. He can throw well on the run, does well rolling out to his right. He makes good decisions with the football, and he's accurate. Something that they point to. And if you're Scott Frost and you're looking to develop a kid, Kane Archer is a great start. He is a great start for you because, like I said, you're not going to attract the big name right out the gate if you're Scott Frost, if you're McKenzie Milton. But if you can take Kane Archer and you can develop this kid and, get him in the upper echelon of Big 12 QBs by year 2 or 3, you might be cooking with something with Kane Archer. I think that, Scott Frost is the guy to do it. Now, what did that look like in the Big 12 this past year? That's something I want to talk about here. The Big 12, if you look at how passing panned out in the conference last year, we refined these numbers a little bit to make sure we're giving you guys accurate stuff. You had Shedeur Sanders was the only 4,000-yard passer in the conference. Obviously, he was level worthy good. You had Josh Hoover at TCU at 3,900 yards. Rocco Becht obviously was a big name in conference last year, 3,500 yards. The conference had 5 3,000-yard plus passers. I think a good start for Scott Frost would be to produce a 3,000-yard passer in year 1. You had a cluster of guys between 2,700 and 2,900 yards. Arizona State's Noah Fifita's 2,958. Jake Retzlaff came up just short of 3,000 yards per ESPN. Sam Levitt, same thing. He was just almost there. Obviously, Arizona State won the whole thing. If he can get a QB to that 3,000-yard mark, I think that you've got a really, really good shot to do something special. Now, where was UCF last year? Well, KJ Jefferson, obviously he got benched, but he wasn't getting it done. 59% completion percentage for as senior as he was, just really disappointing. He only had 1,012 yards. Dylan Risk had 904 yards in the games that he played at 61%. Again, you got to do better than that. E.J. Colson didn't play that much. Jacurri Brown was more of a runner than he was a passer, so he was way down the list of UCF of quarterbacks in conference with only 398 yards passing. You got to have a 3,000-yard passer. I think that it would be really disappointing if Scott Frost can't get his QB to that level. At 3,000 yards, you are creating plays and you're moving the ball at a level where, teams can no longer stack the box against the run. It's incredible what R.J. Harvey was able to do last year, given the lack of a passing game. Can you imagine if UCF had any semblance of a passing game last year? I'm not saying that he would have had more yards running than, Ashton Jeanty at Boise State. I'm not saying that he would have definitely been better than him, but certainly you want a Cam Scatterboo. I'm sorry. I don't know why I thought about that. I couldn't think of his name. Yeah, I'm not saying he would have beat Cam Scatterboo, but I think that if you can't stack the box against him, he runs for a whole lot more. And if you've got more balance, you're more dangerous. You can open up more of your playbook. R.J. Harvey averaged 6.8 yards per carry last season. The only back that did better was Ashton Jeanty. And we all know, how it ended for him, making New York for the Heisman ceremony at 7 yards per carry. But 6.8 yards per carry on this team, Of the top 10 backs in college football, R.J. Harvey had the least amount of opportunities to carry the football. I told my good friend Andrew Gluchov that I thought he was a first-round talent. Andrew said, Mike, you're crazy. He got drafted in the second round. That was a lot higher than a lot of people thought he was going to get drafted. I thought, look, man, he was extremely underutilized, and people underestimated what he could do because of the association with losing and being on a 4-8 team. If you're Scott Frost and you can develop at QB and you can open up the passing games and teams have to respect it, those running backs, you get a running back like R.J. Harvey and he should run wild. But you can't do it alone. No one man can carry the flag. No one man can do it. You got to have a backup. You guys would be surprised how often most teams had to go to their backup for a meaningful start. We'll talk about who's going to be the backup, how they develop a backup next on Locked On UCF. If you don't have two guys that can do the job, you're playing with fire in today's college football. You got to have two quarterbacks. So as much as I like Kane Archer, if you're Scott Frost and McKenzie Milton, obviously you're out there trying to recruit somebody better than him. You're trying to recruit somebody who wants to come in and take his job. You want to recruit the kid that doesn't want to wait his turn. And once you get to that level, you're pushing that talent floor up where it needs to be so that UCF is consistently in the conversation for championships, for Big 12 championships, and for national championships. But it starts with the guys that you have. That's why I singled out Kane Archer. Every time I look at his tape, I love what I see in this kid. I like where his mind is at. And perhaps he could be the great surprise of this recruiting class. You got to have two. You got to have two. And, look, your second guy may come from the portal. I think this is the great thing about the portal. Now, if you can't find your guy from the high school level and you don't want to wait years for him to develop, you get Kane Archer ready to go by next year. I think that's got to be the goal if you're Scott Frost. Get Kane Archer ready to go to compete seriously for the starting job in the spring by next year. And you get him in early, get him in the spring, obviously would be great for them. But not only that, you go to the portal and you find the guy who to compete with him, to push him, to get the best out of him. Now, you've got to get another high school quarterback. They've got two in this class, I believe, right now. But you have to have competition. You've got to have parity in your QB room. You've got to have it. Look what happened to Carson Beck last year. Georgia had to turn to Gunnar Stockton, and he clearly was a step down. They got booted from the playoffs. If your QB1 stays healthy, stays in the game, good for you. But the amount of times in college football last year that some of the higher level teams have had to go to their backup QB for meaningful play, I think you guys would be surprised how often it happens. So, what happens here? Well, UCF recruits a great QB. And then you recruit another great QB. And they say, oh, well, why would this guy stay if, this guy's here? He's not going to want to sit behind him. Yes, he will. As a matter of fact, once these guys get rolling recruiting, fans will have to get used to the idea of high-level attrition. If you're recruiting at a high level, you're going to have talented guys leave your program all the time. That's going to happen. And it's a good problem to have, that you have so much talent that's stacked. The talented guys aren't sitting. But you know what? It's easier to sit and wait your turn when the guy in front of you is balling. And he has a clear path to the NFL that he's going to be gone, and you're next. That's got to be the goal for this staff. That's got to be the goal for McKenzie and Scott Frost. Get the talented guys in the door, convince them to wait their turn, and create a natural succession at the QB position. So it's next man up every single year. Now, eventually, you hit a dud. I'm going to tell you, There are lots of teams out here that have had great runs at quarterback. I think Alabama had one of the better runs at quarterback that I've ever seen. Starting going way back, right, to a guy who is now practically an NFL MVP. But I'm not saying it has to be that great, but certainly I think that the portal should be like a secondary fix for your QB, needs. And you should be primarily focusing on the guys that you recruit from high school. Once they've built that, once they're there, once you're in a position where you're producing those types of kids, you're going to win a lot of football games. That's what Scott Frost is here to do. He's here to win a lot of football games. I think he's the right guy for the job. I can't wait to see it. Does it start with Kane Archer? Maybe. I know he's got all the right tools. If he stays healthy, God willing, what they do with this kid might be the start of something really, really good at UCF. You've hired your guy. You've got your coach. Get behind him. Give him the resources. UCF is a great place. It's a great school. Fans did not bail on this team last year, in spite of the type of season that they had. And you owe it back to some of the best fans in college football to field a team that can go out there and get it done more often than not. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked on UCF. We talked QB today. We're going to talk more offense later this week. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at The Portal Show. Our guy Brian Smith has the latest in rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to college football and the landscape. Go find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and listen to us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.